So good afternoon, everybody, and thank you very much for joining us for our first cinema webinar. And we're going to be talking about all the work that we've been doing during lockdown and now as cinemas are reopening. You may think that it's been a little bit quiet on the cinema front, but actually we've been super busy and it's just going to be getting busier and busier. So we have 4 speakers today. So we have Cassandra Joyce, who's our Client Service Director with Wide Eye Media. She's going to be the first speaker, followed by Shauna Crawley, who is Marketing and Loyalty Manager with Omniplex Cinema Group. Then I'm going to be giving you a little bit of information about the comms and PR work that we've been doing. And then wrapping everything up is Brian Lloyd from entertainment.ie. So without further ado, I'm going to pass over to Cassie Joyce.
Thanks, Sue. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for tuning in today. We're delighted you can join us, especially because we fear that people may be getting a little bit webinared out of it at this stage. So I'm hoping that you'll find what I'm going to do useful in terms of understanding where cinema's at the moment, what's happening, and how cinemas feel about returning to the big screen. Thanks, Ian. So first of all, I'm going to just take a little snapshot from the beginning of the year and where we were. We had a really strong start with the likes of 1917 and Little Women and Sonic all releasing really well at the start. So actually Jan-Feb admissions were up by 10% year on year. We had a strong movie slate to look forward to as well, with Bond, No Time to Die, of course, among loads of others. And we were also seeing plenty of development on the exhibitor side. So cinemas were upgrading, they were extending, they were opening new sites. So there was a lot in place to make it a really great year for cinema. And in case you haven't heard it from us often enough, hopefully you all know that Irish people go to the cinema more than anyone else in the EU. In fact, we have one of the highest per capita cinema rates in the world. So everything was set in place for a good year for 2020. Thanks, Ian. And then, of course, the whole world changed. And just to give you an idea of the kind of timelines and how what was going on around the world affected what was happening in cinema here. The first thing we saw, of course, was that movie dates started to push back. So Bond most notably moved from April into November. And cinemas shut down from March 19th. And then, you know, it came quite quickly then when they were able to reopen on June 29th. So we had some cinemas open then, of course, with safety measures and things like that in place, as Sean was going to talk about. And we were able to schedule ads from July 3rd. As it stands at the moment, we have 49% of cinemas open and operating in the Republic of Ireland, and we're seeing this increasing week to week. So we're expecting that by mid to late August, we should have all cinemas open and up and running. Thanks, Ian. So we felt that there was quite a lot of uncertainty in the media marketplace, and we were being asked a lot about, you know, what's the appetite to return to cinema. So we thought it was a good time to do some research. We conducted an online survey through entertainment.ie between the 24th of June and 4th of July. Happily, we got over 1,200 respondents to the survey. And apart from ensuring that people were 16 or over, we didn't actually restrict the audience in any way to certain demographics or any quotas. And also we left it open to all entertainment.ie readers. So it wasn't just, you know, skewing it towards cinema goers. Thanks, Ian. Just to give you an idea of the age breakdown, almost a third of respondents were in the 35 to 44 age group, closely followed by 25 to 34s. And the next slide. And we found, thanks, Ian. Great. We found that actually about 2/3 of them were between 18 and 44. 64% of them actually came up as female, and 29% of the respondents had kids. So thanks, Ian. We already knew from research around the world that there's a real longing to get back to the cinema. And Kantar research in the UK had shown that that the second most longed activity for people to get back into was cinema, only after pampering themselves so they looked half decent. And also Irish research, the Film Distributors Association had surveyed among Irish people and found that cinema came up third in their most longed for activities, only after seeing family and friends and eating out again. So not surprisingly, when we conducted our survey, cinema came up really, really strong. So dining out came up as number 1, 90%, and going to the cinema was 87%, the second most longed for activity. And then if we go on to the next slide, we can see, just to put those figures in perspective, travelling abroad and attending concerts came in a fair bit lower than that at 67%. And in the 40s then we had attending sporting events and going to the gym. Now, as we move on then, you know, look, we all binged on box sets and streamed, and we relied on that for quite some time during lockdown, which was great. But there comes a point where you can only watch so many box sets, and nothing really replaces the big screen experience. And we certainly found that with our respondents, 80% of them saying they really prefer to see a movie in the cinema rather than on TV or through streaming. Also, 87% of them said they're really looking forward to getting back to cinemas reopening and seeing new releases. And then if we move on, look, you know, if ever there was a time when we needed a bit of escapism, certainly this year has to be it. And that's really what cinema provides. 90% of people agreeing that movies provide a great escape from day-to-day life. And something that we've heard a lot from you guys when you've been in touch with us as well is that we all really miss going to the cinema. 83% of people agreeing that they miss that cinema experience, going to watch a movie. And then if we go on, we'll look at frequency. So 77%, so over 3/4 of people saying they plan to go to the cinema at least once a month once they've reopened. And then when we dug a little bit deeper into exactly when do you intend to return, so 1/4 of respondents said they wanted to return to the cinema immediately, and 61% said that they wanted to return within the first couple of months. Then moving on, also in terms of frequency, 19% of them actually plan to go to the cinema more frequently than they did before lockdown, which is really positive. And another trend that we're seeing as well is that over 1/3 of them saying that they plan to arrive earlier than they did previously. Now, that would make sense with distancing and things like that, but also it's really great news for advertisers if people are turning up even earlier. And there are some other trends that we've noticed. NCM carried out some research in the US where they found that people were saying about how they were going to change slightly when they went to the cinema. So they might be more likely to go during the week, whereas they may have focused on the weekend before, also maybe earlier in the day, different times. Now this is really great news, and we've actually noticed that ourselves from the first couple of weeks of research or of admissions that we've got back from the cinemas, that we're seeing that whereas we would always have a skew naturally towards the weekend, but it's actually leveled right out. Now, as people get back, more people working and things like that, that could change a bit. But we are seeing changes in the way people consume cinema. And given that cinemas have limited capacity, this is really good news that, you know, people are going to spread out their journeys over the week. They're going to go at different times, which enables us to deliver more admissions as well. And then moving on, we know that cinema really is immersive. 65% of people love to totally lose themselves in the movie experience. And when we ask them about what are the things that they really love about cinema, not surprisingly, most people will talk about the fact that it's an occasion with their loved ones and they've got the big screen, surround sound, all those kind of things. But actually, over half of us were talking about grub. We talked about food a lot. So cinema treats are important. Probably that explains why when we saw that Kantar Irish shopper behaviour research that came out recently showed that popcorn sales were actually up 63% in April. So there's a hell of a lot of people at home trying to recreate that cinema experience. But nothing really replaces the big screen and the surround sound, and that heightened excitement and anticipation that you get from going to the cinema is really crucial, particularly if you've got a message up there. It's a really unique way for people to consume your ad. I was kind of surprised by the comfy seats coming up so strong, with nearly half of people saying that that was a really key factor for them. And then when we move on to look at, you know, what are they really looking forward to in terms of movie genres? So again, we all need a bit of a laugh at the moment. That comedy comes up very strong, and thrillers and drama coming up really strong as well. And interesting, when you add together the family and the animation, you get over 50% there looking for that. Now, we saw that only 29% of these respondents actually have kids. But one thing that we did see from the film distributors' research was that among Irish cinema goers, the two groups that were really eager to return immediately to cinema were under 25s and parents of young kids. So that kind of explains why those family movies are in high demand as well. And what about the actual movies they want to go and see? So we've seen research from around the world, and it echoes the ones that we found here from movies.ie, where they asked people what movies they wanted to see the most. So the great news is that yes, we have had loads of changes on the schedule, but actually when you look at the top 10 movies that people in Ireland want to go and see, 7 of them are still in the schedule for this year. There's only 3 of them that have actually moved out. And some really strong ones. Obviously Wonder Woman coming in at number 1, that's releasing on the 2nd of October, and No Time to Die on the 12th of November, apologies, and then Black Widow on the 30th of November. And then Tenet. Now, no doubt you've heard some of the speculation about Tenet and that it has moved from the 12th of August. The great news is that it isn't releasing, it isn't moving out of August totally, and there will be news on that later. So really good movies that people are looking forward to there. And then one of the questions, if we move on there, one of the questions that we're being asked a lot about is admissions and how can we forecast, how can we predict what a campaign is going to deliver. So we're working on a dynamic weekly admissions forecast. So each week that we're planning out, we're looking at, you know, what cinemas are going to be open, how they're performing, which new cinemas are coming online, and what movies are coming online as well, to accurately plan week by week what campaign is going to achieve. Obviously, we're still working to guaranteed admissions as well, so you have peace of mind. And we're looking to other markets, particularly ones that have opened previously to us. So at the moment, the European average that we're seeing is about 27% of the sites that are open, they're delivering 20% of their normal admissions level. In Ireland, and actually, sorry, that really varies. In some countries, like somewhere like the Netherlands, that is kind of ahead of us in terms of that. They've actually got up to about 48% of their normal capacity. So this is really strong. I mean, in Ireland, we're up to 25% already in the sites that are open. And it's pretty impressive when you think about it. I mean, the cinemas have had to open with real restrictions on their numbers and a whole new way of operating to keep their staff and cinema goers safe. But also, they're relying on existing films that had opened before, classic movies, re-releases. There hasn't been any movies, really new movies releasing to draw people in. So what you're seeing here is that even though there isn't a new movie available for people, they're really willing to go along. So we're already at 25%. And what we'll see as well, that as the new movies start to come out, that's going to really increase too. And then, so looking a quick glance, now Brian obviously is going to talk more about the movies later on, but just to give you a quick kind of snapshot of the really big movies that are on the tentpole movies, if you like, on the calendar. So this week we have a couple of movies opening, and from the 31st July, we actually have 10 movies, new movies releasing, including Unhinged with Russell Crowe. And as you can see then, loads of really strong product. So we've had 4 months where the movies couldn't release. So all of those movies have been moved back, obviously, which gives us a real glut of great film product. And so I suppose compared to some other media that might be struggling with new product because of what's happened, we actually have great product there ready for people to come back to the big screen. So just to summarise then, we're up to almost half of all of our cinemas open, and the remaining cinemas are opening as we speak and should be all open by mid to late of August. We've got a really strong slate, as we'll see now in a moment, and also we're using as much information as we can and dynamic forecasting to make sure that we can give you an accurate idea of how your campaigns are going to perform. As we've seen from the research, there's a really strong appetite there among Irish people to get back to their beloved cinemas. So just then, that's really it from me. All I would say is that I hope you found this helpful and interesting. If there is anything in this that you really want to find out a bit more about, or you know, if you want to find out more even about the movies, or to get some idea of, you know, quotes and things like that, do get in touch with myself and the rest of the team, and we'd be happy to hear from you. And thank you for your time.
Thanks, Cassie. That's great. Give us an appetite for H2. My name is Owen Rickson, CEO of WEM Media. Thank you again for coming along. I think that neatly segues to your local cinema and the important part of your entertainment. I want to introduce our next contributor from the Omniplex Group, Marketing and Loyalty Manager with the Omniplex Group, Shauna Crawford. Really great to have her along and get a real insight into how Omniplex are opening up in post-COVID or in these new times. Over to you, Shauna.
Thanks, Owen. I hope everybody can hear me okay. So as Owen kindly introduced, my name is Shauna Crawley and I'm the marketing manager here at Omniplex Cinemas. And we are just really excited to be back. So if you want to jump onto the next slide for me, for those of you who don't know who we are Ireland's largest cinema chain. We closed on the 17th of March, we closed 32 cinemas, and you can see now we have 33 on the slide because we are just crazy enough to open a brand new cinema. So we opened a new cinema on the 3rd of July in Drogheda. It's a brand new deluxe cinema, which actually is so made for a socially distant world because we have 2 meters between the rows of seats anyway, which is ironic, but ideal. We have just over 250 screens and just shy of 35,000 seats across the country. So we are, you know, one of the biggest, and yeah, we're just here to tell you about how we came back. So if you want to jump onto the next slide here. So we closed for 15 weeks, which is the longest, obviously, that cinemas have closed. And honestly, it was a sad day to see all our projectors power down, and it was an emotional day to see them come back up. But our campaign is that we're back and we saved you a seat, and the response has been phenomenal. Even from a social perspective, we made sure that we engaged with our customer base the entire time throughout lockdown, giving them cool tidbits about films or behind the scenes games or quizzes. Over 5,000 people filled in our Harry Potter quiz. So I think that's pretty impressive. And on the next slide here, you'll also see that we're really warmly welcomed by the press as well in terms of coming back. We did a lovely piece with Ireland AM this week, really highlighting the safety messages for cinema. So if you want to jump onto the next slide again here for me, and this is the main thing that we really get asked about is, well, what is cinema like in new normal? So the day that we closed, and honestly from before we closed, we were already working on back to business and how cinemas can open in a safe environment. We are obviously adhering to all of the HSE guidelines to make sure that we can have the safest cinema trip as possible. We have over 400 different points of differentiation that we've done, but we narrowed that then down to 8 key points for our customers. I suppose the number one question we get asked is capacity. So we do have a reduced capacity, and at the moment we are working in and around about a 30% because we have dynamic in-cinema seat separation, which we did actually launch before lockdown. So the classic example is, you know, 4 people going together, 2 adults, 2 kids. You go online and you choose your 4 seats. What we will do is lock the 4 seats behind you, the 4 seats in front of you, and the 2 seats either side of you. And that really seems to give customers a lot of reassurance that you really are 2 meters from anybody else. So instead of going through all of these 8 points, I have a little 1-minute video that, if works for us, Ian, on the next slide, that would be ideal. Thank you very much, Ian. And then just on the next slide, I hope that played okay for everybody. It's our little happy buzzy that has been seen from digital and social perspective. 1.3 million is our reach on that video so far, with a frequency of 1.1. For all of the marketing and data people that are on this call, we're aiming to get that up to a 3.5 frequency before we start moving on to our next campaign. So as a cinema group, we've decided to heavily focus on the safety message and really tying in what it's like to come back to the cinema before moving on to a more emotional marketing campaign about what cinema really means to us. So hopefully you've seen that video. If not, I will be retargeting you very soon. So this is what our cinemas look like. As you can see, cinema hasn't really changed. Cinemas are huge, and we have huge foyers, huge cinema auditoriums. So all it means is that you're going in one exit and out another one. Luckily or unluckily, depending on how you look at it from a brand branding perspective, COVID colours are the same as Omniplex colours. So actually it fits in pretty well. In our foyers, we have things like this new host station, so you'll get greeted when you arrive to make sure that you've got your tickets, to encourage you to sanitize your hands, and to make sure you can have a safe cinema trip. So all we can say is that the feedback so far has been overwhelmingly positive. I think anybody who specifically works in social media has probably been going, how are they going to do this, and answering all these questions. But honestly, even our return to cinema rate, so we've only been up and running now for 3 weekends, and people are coming back, and people are coming back week by week. We've got a customer who's come in every day, and that's kind of how safe. And that particular customer is actually a shielder or a cocooner as well. So it's a really interesting feedback to get. And then if we just jump onto the next slide here, you're probably also wondering what we've done in terms of content. Now, Brian is the master in this, and he's going to go through what we're doing later on, and Cassie's had some lovely stuff. But in terms of what's really worked for us so far, this is the box office in order. So the #1 film since we've come back has been Trolls World Tour. And then Onward, Empire Strikes Back. So you can see there's a great collection there. But what this also really tells us is a lot about our profiling. So I'm going to go through a little bit of the profiles of customers that are coming back. The Conjuring there is a really interesting one. Now, we are the largest cinema group that's open right now, so we do sort of control a certain amount of the box office in terms of what hits kind of the top 10. But it's a risk taker profile that I think is just a really interesting one. I'm going to talk about in a minute. It's also being seen internationally that these sort of thrillers and risk takers are coming back to the cinema. A really interesting one, if anybody is into Korean film, is something called #Alive. It is the first movie in New Normal that has hit 1 million people in the first opening weekend. So that is really positive. We're working a lot with international cinemas. South Korea are a couple of weeks ahead of us. So they had the same sort of trend reopening, that it's a slow return to business. I mean, first weekend we definitely got a nice bump, but it is going up and up and up every week. And then when South Korea had that new content to drop, which was a highly anticipated sequel, 1 million people came out over 3 days. So we can definitely see that cinema has a direct path to return. And then on the next slide, you'll see some stuff that we have coming up. Yeah, Mamma Mia, I think, is a super exciting one for this weekend. I mean, the first time we released it, we had people dancing in the aisles. So hopefully we'll get that same amount of joy, just 2 meters apart. And then we have some new releases. We've got The Vigil, which is a horror film coming out this weekend. Broken Law is a really interesting Irish movie coming out on the 31st. And tickets are going to be on sale for that soon. Omniplex is supporting this title. Unhinged with Russell Crowe. Watch the trailer, it's a bit odd. And then, of course, Tenet. Brian's going to touch on what the new releases are going to be like, so I won't waste too much time on that. But I will say, from a cinema perspective, if you look into these press releases that are coming out past the headline of things have been moved indefinitely, there's a lot happening in cinemas. On average, cinemas bring out 710 titles per year, and realistically, we're talking about 10 titles that have moved. They are huge, and we cannot wait for them to come out, but there is a lot of content there, and trust us, we're not sitting on our laurels. We are making sure that we have new content for everybody. So in terms of who's coming back, if you want to jump onto that next slide for me. In terms of the age breakdown, we're looking at an average age of 32. That's booking tickets. So where you'll see on this slide, you can see here that our 30 to 48 is at 38%, which is our highest profile. There is a certain cohort of that are booking tickets for teenagers. So we would take that down by an extra 3% and put that at 35%. And like the Wide Eye Media research, actually, we are seeing a skew towards females as well. And generally with the type of content that we would be bringing out, we would normally see a skew towards males. So I think that's really interesting. And then on the next slide here, in terms of the people that are actually converting through to booking, this is the sort of things that they're into. So what they're searching for, hotels is a huge one, staycations, travel tips within Ireland, real estate has been a really interesting one, specifically for buying rather than selling, online shopping, books, pet clothing, travel. So there's sort of a wide range of people coming through, but obviously movies, TV. But if you look at it in terms of the data, I mean, this is to scale. Hotels is coming in the same size as TV. So, I mean, they're sticking around. And then next slide, please. which is my last one. So these are the 4 sort of key profiles that we've been talking to. It's a chicken and egg situation. I'm not talking to a sort of very old profile either, so they're not seeing this content, but they're also the least likely to come back. So the 4 main ones that we're focusing on is blockbuster buddies. These are the guys who would have several streaming services, not just one. So they're probably most likely to have signed up to Disney Plus during this as well. Generally employed, although a new normal, what does that really mean? That could have changed. They come out for the big blockbusters. So these are the guys that are seeing Mamma Mia, Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter, Superman, and the big screen content, but are unlikely to see the more indie content like St. Francis that we have coming out. They are heavy YouTube watchers, and their average group size has swelled from 2.1 to 2.4. So from a data perspective from us, that means that they're probably going out with more friends at a time. Blockbuster buddies rarely go to the cinemas by themselves, so they would generally go as a 2, but now they're either adding on a child or an extra friend. The second would be a risk taker, and I just made a little note here that this kind of ties in with one of the profiles Cassie was talking about, with 64% wanting to see thrillers. Risk takers were the first people booking tickets. They like horror films, they like thriller films, they like escapism. They're actually most likely to be an essential worker or have worked all of the way through lockdown. They will have streaming services, but will likely share those passwords with their friends. And they've got minimal savings, and they're really interested in travel, so they have an extra bit of disposable income, and hopefully are using that on going to the cinema, which is lovely. Families, obviously a big market as well. Currently most likely to be going in a pairing of 2 adults and 2 children, rather than 2 adults or one child, 3. Most interested in the animated content. So this is the Dream Builders, the Lego movie, which would generally suggest that they're a little bit younger children. And then the last one is a new profile for me, which is called Dinner and a Movie. So these are the people who just really want an experience and just really want to escape, and they're really climbing in the amount of customers that are coming back in. They are most likely to be a couple going on date night, or a group of girls that want to go see Mamma Mia and potentially sneak Prosecco into the cinema. Not recommended, but I know you do it. They're also heavy social media users and often influencers. So this is our sort of profiling that are coming back in. We hope to expand this out to 8 or 9 different profiles as the weeks go on and as new content comes in. So that's a whistle-stop tour of Omniplex Cinemas. Thank you very much. Don't forget to come to Omniplex Cinemas and check us out, see how safe it is, and we look forward to welcoming you.
That's great. Thanks, Shauna. Brilliant stuff. I know Shauna briefly mentioned it in her piece, but definitely it's worth you checking out the Virgin Media piece that Shauna did. We put it up on social media, made sure it was shared. Well worth a look to see the steps that are in place in Omniplex as a welcome back patrons. Really appreciate that, Shauna, and the insights. Remember, questions, top right hand corner of your screen, please. We're going to have, after the Brian speaks, we're going to have we're going to go through them, but it'd be great to kind of hear what questions you would like to ask some of our panelists. Right, I think the thing is, as Cassie mentioned, you know, from and Shauna, from Patrick's Day, the cinemas closed and they only really opened up again starting on the 29th of June. But we didn't sit on our hands during that time. As Cassie went through the research, we were busy in that end of things. And additionally, we were very busy with our cinematogether.ie project, which I am now going to introduce Sue Duff, our Marketing and Research Director with Wide Eye Media, and she's going to go through some of the great developments there. Sue, over to you.
Great, thanks very much, Owen. And I'm glad you mentioned about the Shauna on our channel. Sorry, my mic has just fallen off. That's perfect timing. Right, back at it now. So I'm glad you mentioned about Shauna being on TV this week and being on our Twitter feed. So it's well worth a watch. So yes, we were very busy during lockdown, and we listened intently to market data and customer feelings about returning to activities that people previously loved and previously frequented a lot. And really this data became the lifeblood of future planning for us. We were looking at data from Ireland, the US, UK, and some of our European neighbours. We read about mental health difficulties prevalent in China after the lockdown, And for many at the forefront of the pandemic, we all know this, life didn't automatically bounce back to joy. We also spoke with exhibitors, film distributors and advertising industry colleagues. So we gathered loads of ideas and we distilled the information and mapped out our thoughts, and I'm going to share those with you now. So we wanted to have a look to see what the post-lockdown opportunity for cinemas might be in a nation of movie lovers and frequent cinema goers. So during lockdown, it was a time when people were hanging on to every word of the news and wondering what was going to happen next. And really, people were more than ever surrounded by hard, cold facts. And for many people, regardless of their age, but perhaps living alone, there was a growing sense of isolation, worry, fear, anxiety. While streaming platforms and TV filled a great void and provided some distraction for people, we do know that Netflix had more new subscribers globally than they forecast for the first part of the year, and Disney Plus, of course, launched as we were locked down. However, caregiving, queuing, increased cleaning, talking from my own side here too, homeschooling, financial worries and new demands on time, life was really completely upended for everybody and exhausting for many people. So as the light at the end of the tunnel started to glimmer, there was a growing desire and a sense of urgency for life to return to normal. And as Cassie mentioned, a quarter of our survey were keen to get back to the cinema right as soon as the cinemas were opening. They wanted to return immediately. And then another 4 in 10 saying that they would return shortly thereafter. So once again, we recognise that uplifting power of the big screen. If Ian, you can just click there for me. That ability to fully step into a story and get lost in the content, the learning, the entertainment, and that positive side of creativity and imagination, and how this really makes people feel very good. And after a prolonged period of isolation, the opportunity for a shared experience at the cinema also reminds us of the immense potential of a connected community of cinema goers. So nevertheless, whilst we're moving into a new normal now after lockdown, we realise there is going to be some questions and some doubt about going out and about to public spaces. And we know we have to listen to these. So consumer trust and operational integrity remains absolutely paramount for everybody right now. So from these ideas, we created our Back to the Big Screen strategy. And this is going to take us from June, when the cinemas reopened, all the way into 2021. So first off, I'm just going to show you how we've kind of mapped out 2 sides to our communication campaign. So we're recognizing that people will return at their own pace, some age demographics and families being earlier to return to public spaces than others. But our engagement campaign will talk to each group at the relevant time and in the appropriate tone. Between feedback from other markets, our own research tracking and information from industry partners, we're able to respond accordingly. So to get started, we launched a site called cinematogether.ie. Hopefully you have heard of it already. It's going to be the central platform around which the engagement and communication can hinge for us. So from here stems a PR and communication activity on the one hand, and a source of information and fact-based messaging on the other. So I'm going to delve a little deeper into each part of this now in the next few slides. So next one, thanks Ian. So cinematogether.ie celebrates your local cinema. It celebrates local cinemas all around Ireland in all 32 counties. These are special places in a community. They're a home for wonder and surprise. A local cinema may feature in your own memory of childhood. It may have facilitated some great dates for you, and no doubt it has whisked you away oftentimes to faraway places. So as you know, they are a home to a shared awe, shock, horror, and an audience lives together through a story. And this augments the emotion and the experience. So they are also a venue of joy and meetups for many people that spend much of their life alone. So with cinema closures and the inability to share experiences during lockdown being particularly pertinent, we chose to team up with the charity Alone and highlight their impactful national helpline and volunteer network. We launched in late June, and we and several of our cinema and film distributor colleagues asked our own communities to visit cinematogether.ie and watch a short movie about Alone. In return, White Eye Media undertook to donate to the charity as a thank you for their work for the people of Ireland that have been feeling very isolated. Next slide, please. In addition to support our cinema industry colleagues, in the use of hashtag Cinema Together and awareness of the platform. This was kindly shared by many colleagues in the advertising industry. Thank you very much. We really appreciate that. So in addition to this word of mouth, we built upon it further with some advertising. We used large format billboards, digital out of home at convenience stores and forecourts, as well as 6 weeks of radio advertising and mentions across 4 different radio stations. Then, with cinema opening being fast-tracked by the government, our second hashtag, which was Hello Big Screen, moved into circulation a little earlier than planned, and that's been incorporated into our messaging, our social channels and PR. So next slide. So any of you who have managed to reserve a seat and make the great escape back into the cinema already, you may have seen the pre-reel message, hashtag Hello Big Screen, your cinema missed you. So this is a piece that's 1.5 minutes long, and it takes the audience from the sad, quiet and eerie emptiness of a lockdown cinema to the range of dynamic emotions experienced and shared as auditoriums reopened. And actually Shauna mentioned how emotional that was when the auditoriums reopened. So it's a literal take on lights, camera, action with the switch of a button, or in this instance really it's with the decision of the government and a government announcement. Then next then, as new Irish and international film content releases across August, we'll be rolling out our Escape to the Big Screen creative online, and it's going to sit alongside influencer dialogue and infomercial content as part of the parallel fact-based information. Next, thanks, Ian. So the parallel information campaign, or part B, has been quietly building, and it's there to reassure audiences. While our own and international research consistently shows that upwards of 87% of people are missing going to the cinema and looking forward to returning, we do recognise the importance of hearing and acknowledging concerns that people may have. And we are looking to share safety protocols in the same way that Shauna did recently in her video that she just showed you, as well as with the piece on Ireland IN this week. So throughout July, we've been driving people to cinematogether.ie to ask questions about how their next cinema visit may differ slightly. And we used radio advertising to highlight the opportunity to raise a query. We collated the questions both by email and from our survey with entertainment.ie at the end of June. And the next wave of PR is just launching, and that's going to be highlighting some of the answers. And now I'm going to show you a little safety animation video, which will just release today now on cinematogether.ie.
When you come back to the cinema, you'll notice that changes have been made to help you enjoy a safer big screen experience. We're encouraging everyone to book their tickets online. When you arrive, you'll be asked to use one of the hand sanitizers. They've been provided to help keep you safe. Inside the cinema, please observe social distancing. Distancing markers will be on the floor, and there may be one-way systems in parts of the cinema. The staff will be on hand to help. At ticket desks and concession kiosks, you'll notice that plastic screens have been installed for your protection, as well as that of the team. If face coverings become mandatory, everyone needs to wear one. Until then, you can do so if it makes you more comfortable. If you buy food and drink, please use contactless payment. Allocated seating ensures social distancing is maintained in each screen. Please sit on the seat number shown on your ticket. You'll also notice there is more time between each film, ensuring you can safely leave the screen, and to allow staff to thoroughly clean it between each show. This is just one example of the increased cleaning we'll be undertaking around the cinema. All of the cinema team have been trained on COVID-19 and the measures put in place to keep you safe. Please ask them if you have any questions. Your cinema is doing all they can to ensure you enjoy a safer big screen experience. Please act responsibly and follow any advice from the cinema staff. Enjoy a safer big screen experience. To find out more, go to cinematogether.ie.
Thanks, Ian. So just to quickly show then that across the last 2 months and going into August, we've mapped out our PR and media approaches. So we've been looking at the launching of the concept of Cinema Together in late June, listening for concerns and sharing information around safety in July and onwards. And then the final piece is reward. So next, thanks. So once all of this groundwork has been fully laid and walked upon, we're going to start to build a rewarding community for those early adopters who return to cinema across the demographic profiles. We'll be developing competitions, rewards, and special curated content with a number of partners across the industry. And we'll start to bring together tangible rewards when people book for their favourite new movies at their local cinema. And these initiatives are going to continue all the way through into 2021. So finally, in wrapping up, I wanted to include this image from The Shawshank Redemption, one of my favorite classics from the 1990s. For those of you that don't know the story, the lead character, Andy, made a major escape from prison by digging a massive tunnel with a small rock hammer. He hides his work behind a poster of actress Rita Hayworth. Yes, she's a movie star. She helped him believe in something bigger and brighter. And in the movie, he ponders, he says, I have to remind myself that birds aren't meant to be caged. Birds fly, birds experience, and birds soar. And just like movies on the big screen, they take you to places that you've never been to before. Take, for instance, the hothouse of movies lined up for the balance of 2020. We'll take a little look now.
Thanks, Sue. See, I told you we've been busy. Right, that's great. cinematogether.ie. Right, again, don't forget your questions. And after our next speaker, we'll look to go through some of those. Please, there's some that have come in and we will go through them. Look, for the last 100 years, the industry, I've read this, yes, has proven itself to be recession-proof. Sadly, last few months, not been pandemic-proof. But the outlook is brighter, as a few of our panelists have gone through today. And to talk us through some of the brightness is that hater of all things boring. I am, of course, referring to Brian Lloyd, movies editor with Entertainment.ie. Hi, Brian.
Hello. Good stuff. Yeah, so I have to try follow all of that. So yeah, I guess we'll just crack into the 2020 cinema releases that are planned up. First up we have is Unhinged, and this is going to release on July 31st. This was actually the first press screening I got to see in 4 months, and it's funny, we were all talking about how emotional it is to go back to the cinema. But for me, it was very strange. I really wasn't expecting to kind of have the reaction that I did, but however, of course, for somebody who does it professionally, but however, anyway. So, Unhinged, this is a psychological thriller. It's the first major movie coming back into cinema. It's going to be over 100 screens in Ireland. It stars Academy Award winner Russell Crowe, who plays this demented road rage driver. Very kind of similar to Fallen Down, people might remember, with Michael Douglas. I have seen this. It's under embargo, so I can't talk about it too much, but I will say I think it's the perfect film to come back into cinemas. Moving on, then we have Tenet. Now, Tenet has, and this is going from the traffic that we've seen on entertainment.ie. This has definitely been one of the most talked about films of the summer. There's huge online buzz for this. What's it about? Well, again, if you know Christopher Nolan, if you know his work, he usually tends to keep things very, very secretive. In fact, he almost seems to kind of enjoy misdirecting audiences with his work in the trailers and stuff like that. So, yeah. But this stars Robert Pattinson, John David Washington, and Kenneth Branagh. And from what I've been able to gather from the trailers and what I've seen online is that it's basically about like time travel, but it's not time travel, it's time inversion. If you've seen the trailer, it's really cool. They do this thing where like they shoot the gun and then the bullet flies back into the gun. It's very, very cool. Like I said, it's directed by Christopher Nolan, who previously made Inception, The Dark Knight, The Prestige, Interstellar, Dunkirk as well. So it's very, 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 very well known director. And also as well, Inception has gone back into cinemas for the 10-year anniversary, and I can't think of a better film to play as a double bill with it. Yeah, so this is going to be really, really exciting. Next up then we have, I think we jumped a slide there. Yeah, The New Mutants. Now, this is planned for August 28th, and this will be the first comic book movie to make it into the cinemas since lockdown. Now, the release date for this has changed quite a bit. It has nothing to do with COVID-19 and the pandemic. It has to do with the fact that there was some sort of, well, I don't want to get too gossipy, but there was a lot of internal struggles in Disney over the film. But from what I'm hearing about this, though, that this is going to be actually pretty interesting. This is going to be pretty good, because the comparisons that people are giving it to, I've heard some people compare it to The Lost Boys. I've heard some people compare it to something like The Shining meets The Breakfast Club, which is right there. That's two films right there that I'm already interested in seeing. So this stars Anya Taylor-Joy, who people will know from Peaky Blinders, Maisie Williams from Game of Thrones. The less said about that, the better. And Charlie Heaton, who people will know from Stranger Things. I haven't seen this yet, but I am excited to see this because the director behind this, Josh Boone, very, very interesting director. And I think that kind of the tack that they're taking with it, it's not your usual sort of, destroying half the city in a blockbuster for comic book movies. This is kind of going in a little bit of a direction. And prior to lockdown, we had kind of noted ourselves that audiences were a little bit, there's a bit of comic book fatigue, I think. So I think anything that goes in a new direction, people are going to be excited to see. Next up then we have Bill and Ted Face the Music. Now this is slotted for a September 1st release, and this will also have a premium video on demand release. Now, anecdotally, what I'm hearing from people, especially in Ireland, is that premium video on demand is not getting the buy-in that studios initially expected. And the reason for that is that, again, this has been covered by everybody else, is that it just doesn't replicate the same experience as the cinema. People are paying cinema prices for these premium video on demands, but they're not getting the cinema experience and not getting the big screen and not getting the great sound. They're just getting the content before everyone else. And for that, people are kind of saying, right, well, I can just I'll wait for this to come onto Netflix rather than buy into it. So getting this into cinemas, people are going to want to see it. This is a legacy sequel to Bill and Ted's Adventure. Stars Keanu Reeves and Alex Winter. It's a cult comedy throwback. I think this is going to be really interesting. Then moving on to The King's Man. This is set for September 18th. This is a prequel to Kingsman and Kingsman: The Golden Circle. This is really, really exciting. This kind of has comparisons to Sherlock Holmes and the James Bond franchise, in that it's really kinetic, it's really action-packed. You have people like Ray Fiennes, Gemma Arterton, who of course was in Quantum of Solace. But yeah, this has a really kind of big following. The two films, Kingsman and Kingsman: Golden Circle, did really well in box office. So I think the feeling is that this will follow in the same kind of vein. Then moving on to Wonder Woman 1984. Now, this is set for October 2nd. Stars Gal Gadot, Chris Pine, Kristen Wiig, and Pedro Pascal. Big 80s set sequel to Wonder Woman. I'm really excited about this because the director of this, Patty Jenkins, has been talking a lot about how the film is going to move things forward for Wonder Woman and for the sort of DC franchise, if you like. And also as well, like the soundtrack I've seen, or sorry, the trailer I should see, had like Blue Monday playing over it, and it was just brilliant. If you haven't seen it, it's absolutely fantastic. Then moving on to, for the rest then for October really is going to be a big month in the cinemas. We have The French Dispatch, that's from Wes Anderson. Now in the US that has gone to unset, but what I've been told by Disney and Fox is that October 16th is still set for release in Ireland. Candyman as well, this is a reboot of the famous 90s horror. Big online buzz about that. Then we have Black Widow starring Scarlett Johansson, which is the first Marvel Cinematic Universe film since Avengers Endgame last year. That's going to be a really big release. Then moving on to No Time to Die. So this is set for November 12th. This will be Daniel Craig's final performance as Bond. It's changed release date several times. Again, not owing to the COVID-19 pandemic, due to the fact that the production had to shut down over, I think there was issues with the script and so on and so forth. But potentially this is going to be the biggest movie of 2020. No Time to Die has a huge amount of excitement behind it from a very, very fervent fan base, and also as well just people who just like going to the cinemas. Like for people like me who spend their days, trawling, blogs and news sites and all the rest of it looking for information, people will just go to the cinema and say, oh yeah, it's Daniel Craig, yeah, give me one for that, and that's how they'll make their decision on it. So yeah, this has a big crossover appeal. Then we move on to Soul, and this is set for November 28th. This is a family animated movie starring Jamie Foxx, Tina Fey, Felicia Rashad, and Questlove. Now, this is Disney Pixar's only movie for the remainder of the year. Onward was previous to that, and that did very, very well. There's a similar inspiration to Inside Out in this, in that Jamie Foxx plays this jazz piano player, who I think he falls down a manhole and then he wakes up and he's in the afterlife. Now that might seem a little bit dark for kids, but again, this is Disney Pixar. They are able to take complex ideas and distill them down to a way that kids and families can interact with those ideas and do it in such a way that it tells a really, really beautiful story. So I'm really, really looking forward to that. And that's the other thing as well. Disney Pixar, as much as it's, a family event and kids will want to go to it, you'd be surprised. A lot of people my age would happily go to a later screening of it to see it. So definitely worth the watch. Then we are moving on to Peter Rabbit 2. Now this is set for December 11th. This is a sequel to Peter Rabbit, which took 3.3 million at the Irish box office in 2018. The cast includes Donald Gleeson, Margot Robbie, Sia Furler, Rose Byrne, and James Corden. If I can go off script for a minute, I can't stand James Corden and I hated the first film, but this did really, really well. So it's not for me to knock people's taste or whatever, and I can see everybody laughing. Yeah, I hated the first one, but what do I know? It made 3.3 million at the box office and people loved it. So who am I to what the critics know? Then moving on to Dune. Now, this is set for December 18th. This is a new sci-fi franchise directed by Denis Villeneuve, who did Sicario, who did Blade Runner 2049. Stars internet boyfriend Timothée Chalamet and Josh Brolin and Oscar Isaac. Zendaya and Rebecca Ferguson are also starring in it. Now, I don't know if anyone else has been spending lockdown basically reading books that they've had sitting on the shelves for ages, but I actually read Dune during lockdown just to kind of give myself something to do. And this actually inspired Star Wars, among others. It has a huge following, but also as well as the fact that the cast that are in this, Timothée Chalamet, has huge social media following. So people who wouldn't necessarily go to see a big, huge sci-fi film like this, they'll go to see this because Timothée Chalamet is in it. So I'm really looking forward to that, and that's for December 18th. And yeah, and that's all I have to say. So thanks for listening.
Sorry. Thank you, Brian. That's great. Yeah, the distributors or studios were very busy last night, so with their release dates. So cheers, Brian, for jumping right in there, and a lot of changes were made. But thanks again. It's important to note, and in my intro I referenced it, but Brian, of course, is a star of a new ad on entertainment.ie, We Hate Boring, and you got to go and watch. It's very good. I have to say, you've another calling there, Brian. It's basically We Hate Boring. Check it out. Competitions, podcasts, new material, and much more. Yeah, We Hate Boring, entertainment.ie. Right. Look, thank you very much. I just want to come to some questions that we've got in, and if you don't mind, I'm going to kind of go through. The first one I'm going to go and ask back to you, Brian, if you don't mind. There has been a lot of kind of Sean, if you want to jump in on this as well, but there's a lot of whispers and a lot of chatter online about potential splitting of release dates between European and US. So just so that everybody is aware, like from a studio perspective now, films have been moved to a standard release date globally, but increasingly over the last week and a bit, there's a lot of chatter around splitting the release dates into different markets. Brian, what would be your view on that, or have you any insights? Sound, Brian.
I've done mute. Hey, sorry about that. Yeah, so it's actually funny you say that, because I was actually speaking to a couple of colleagues in the US, and what they're getting from the studio, they'd have a direct line to the studios, obviously. what they're finding is that it's actually the US studios now are actually at a case where the feeling is in America is that the government is not going to get a handle on the COVID-19 pandemic, at least for another 6 months. And the studios can't continue to shelf and warehouse their content indefinitely. They just can't. So what they've now basically decided to do is to stagger release dates going forward. Now, one of the films that I mentioned at the start was Tenet. Tenet was originally planned for July 17th, day and date worldwide. That obviously didn't happen. Then it moved to August 10th, and now that's become unset. Now, I can't go into too many details. I've been warned not to under pain of death. But what I have been told is that a release date is coming for Tenet. It will be in August. And that then will be staggered across worldwide. And that's also going to play into the likes of, if a film gets unset again, like say, for example, Mulan. Mulan became unset last night. The release date was removed. That will probably get a release date in and around the same time it was due to get here. I think it was like September or something like that. So that will probably get a release date here. And then the US release date will be October, November, or whenever the US comes out of this, or at least gets to a point where we're at it. And that's it. Yeah, I mean, I think the feeling is in the US is that cinemas are closed for the foreseeable future, but that doesn't mean that the movie industry and the theatrical industry globally has to do what the US does. I mean, yes, the US is the biggest movie market in the world, and China is the second biggest movie market in the world. But in China, they haven't had the same problems. What they've done is that they've tried to curtail cinemas down to 2 hours. Now, there's talk already that isn't feasible in the long term and that cinemas will eventually just go back to normal. But in the US, I mean, there's lockdown orders, there's shelter in place orders, and nobody knows when they're going to come out of it, if they're even going to come out of it anytime soon. So the rest of the world just has to move on. And that's the same with cinema releases. So yeah, you're definitely going to see films released in Ireland, in the UK, across Europe before it's released in the US. And that would be the first time that's ever happened. And to be honest, I think that's a good thing because people can't stay locked down forever, and cinemas are crying out for new content. They want to show new content. Audiences want new content. We've seen it as well in traffic. People are desperate to see new movies because people are just tired of scrolling through Netflix and Amazon Prime. So they want something new, and they want to get out of their houses. They've been stuck inside for the last 4 months, and just any kind of change of scenery is good change of scenery. So yeah, definitely.
Okay, great. Could I ask the next question to you, Sean, if you don't mind? In from Chloe Barton here. We've seen over the last few years that Sky Cinema have done some day-and-date releases in cinema. We've seen it on Netflix to The Irishman during lockdown. We saw Disney Plus doing this too. You know, what do you see as the threats? And I mean, I think this is both you, Sean, and Brian. I'd like to kind of see what your view on that would be.
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, we as a brand are quite vocal about the theatrical window. I assume most people on this call know what that means, but for those that don't, is that the movie gets released in the cinemas an X number of weeks before it would go to either PVOD, which is premium on demand like Sky Cinema or Sky Movies, or Netflix. I think it just depends on whether it's big screen content. I mean, I think people are potentially surprised that we're showing Trolls right now. It did go onto a PVOD, but that was extraordinary circumstances. I think studios are recognizing right now, especially since they've done PVOD over lockdown, how important cinema is to release. So I would still see the standard model being releasing in cinemas first, so that they can get that major blockbuster. I mean, look at South Korea and #Alive. That's an amazing number to be able to get over 3 days in a market. Look at France, Spain, Italy's numbers. I mean, all of these cinemas are still delivering massive box offices. I see that the industry will change and we will adapt with it. The same way studios, like Brian said, are going to adapt to. They're going to release in Europe potentially before they release in the US. So I think it's an ongoing conversation, but as a brand, we are committed to the theatrical window. And if you want to release in our cinemas, release us with us first.
Okay, that's great. Cheers. Brian, did you want to add anything in there?
No, that's pretty much it. Yeah. Yeah, I think, no, I mean, pretty much exactly what Sean has said. I do think that the studios are at a point now where they have to start releasing films, that they can't keep these things indefinitely. Premium video on demand, yeah, it is going to be a threat, but I mean, people have been stuck inside for 4 months and they just want to get out, and like you cannot. I mean, as all the data has shown, you know, people are buying popcorn. They're trying to replicate. They're trying to get what they can get in the cinema at home, and it doesn't come up close. So, yeah, I don't see much. It's not that I don't see a threat, but I do think that lockdown has really kind of crystallized the difference between the home experience and the cinema experience, and people are hungry for the cinema experience and they're going to want that. So, yeah. Okay,
brilliant. Thank you. Shauna, just a quick question for you, and I think it relates to kind of some of the things that you were talking about on Omniplex, and particularly with the scheduling. Does and a question came in there, are the trailers going to be limited and the ads going to be limited before the movie play out, now that you've got this more dynamic scheduling?
Yeah, absolutely. So I suppose in terms of the scheduling itself, we do have 20 minutes in between shows so that you're not crossing over with another group. And that's why people are arriving early and sitting in their seats, which you guys have seen in data. So yes, we are limiting the number of ads and trailers. We did actually test whether or not removing them completely would go down well. And it was a hell no. I mean, people think that this is part of a whole experience. And when we went out to the market and we said, you know, what would happen if this was gone? Even if it's a trailer that has the wrong, you know, end date and stuff on it, and they're like, that's why we go. I mean, a lot of feedback we got is people playing the ad game. I don't know if you guys know what this is, where you have to try and guess the brand before the brand comes up on the screen, which is apparently a game that a lot of people play in cinemas. So yeah, we are going to limit it down, so there will be less ads playing, less trailers playing, but they will still be a big part of the experience. So I guess if you're advertising, it means you've got less competition at the time, but they are sitting there, and they're sitting there with popcorn watching it. So yeah.
Brilliant. Okay. Look, guys, at this stage, at this stage, I'm going to kind of wrap up. I think just in summation, where we are is 50% of cinemas on the island of Ireland are currently open. We're looking at by end of July, mid-August, the rest of them opening. Graduated opening. Currently at the moment with those 50%, it's around about 25% admissions. And as Cassie pointed out, what we're seeing when you consider that's all, this weekend is when the new releases are coming out. So any of the historic figures are based on previously released films, and it's all to the point that Brian and Shauna have made. It's about people re-engaging with cinema and re-engaging their love of cinema. So from my perspective, I just want to thank the panel today. Marketing and Loyalty Manager with Omniplex Group, Shauna Crawford, thank you. Sue Duff, Marketing Research Director with Wide Eye Media, thank you. Brian Lloyd, Movies Editor with Entertainment.ie, and Cassie Joyce, Client Service Director with Wide Eye Media. I also want to thank Jenny Douglas and Ian McNaught, without whom this would not have been possible. I want to thank you for taking the time to escape to the big screen. Remember, go to your local cinema, experience it, take a break. We look forward to seeing you soon. Okay, thank you again for coming.